said, "You see that rope in the suitcase? I need you to use them to take care of the assistants. Put her in the suitcase and leave it in the garage within 10 minutes. Make sure no one sees you." And just as he was about to leave, he turned back to me and added, "Oh, and keep my office clean." Then he left.
Why do you stick around? You know I never make you proud, but here you are, holding my head up.
I stayed in the office for about 2 minutes, thinking hard. Why did he want me to harm this beautiful, innocent girl? The men I had dealt with before had been a different story. I knew refusing to serve me a drink wasn't really a reason for such horrible actions, but at least there was some kind of interaction. This girl, on the other hand, had just started working here, and I found myself liking her a bit. Why did he want her gone? I quickly realized that I had no choice if I wanted to keep this job, so I began to think of a plan. My idea was to call her into the room under the pretense of asking for a cup of coffee. Then, when she comes by to place it on the desk and walk past me, I would find the moment to act. That's exactly what I did. I opened the door, stepped outside to find her, and asked her for some coffee. She responded kindly and politely, and returning to the office, I closed the door behind me, took the rope, and stood next to a bookshelf, pretending to browse through the books. 2 minutes later, she walked in, as innocent as ever. I told her to place the coffee on the desk. She smiled and moved past me towards it. It was the moment to carry out my plan. However, she had left the door open, which meant someone could possibly see inside. Then she asked, "Do you want sugar in your coffee?" I replied yes, and she started to add a sugar cube to my cup while I walked over to the door and softly closed it. She didn't seem to notice or mind, and in fact she was still smiling, and for a brief moment I wondered if she might actually like me too. But I quickly stopped myself from thinking of that. She was about 10 steps away from me. As I walked towards her, gripping the rope tightly in both hands, I felt my hands go numb from the pressure. When I was about halfway there, at the 5th or 6th step, the door suddenly opened. I turned around to see the 2 guys standing there. You could tell right away they were from the Mafia, just by looking at them. They were what we call runners. Some people also like to call them associates. They were not like the big bosses. These guys were still stuck in the fashion of the 60s, even though it was 1993. They had a thing for crocodile leather shoes, crocodile leather jackets, and crocodile leather hats. It was as if 2 crocodiles entered the room. "Hey bambino, come here. The boss wants to see you." As I walked over, I started worrying that I hadn't completed the boss's task quickly enough. That's why he wanted to see me now. Then one of them said, "That's Lucia, the daughter of Don Pescara." And that's when it clicked that my boss was Don Pescara. In the Mafia world, if you're a boss and not from Sicilia or Sicily, you're often known by the city you come from, like Don Corleone from Corleone. Don Pescara was named after his city, Pescara. They said, "Yeah, he's waiting for you in the car." So I started walking with them. I was a step ahead, with one of them on each side of me. We reached the elevator, but they suggested we take the stairs instead. As we approached the stairs, I realized we'd have to go down 10 flights. The situation felt odd. Why all this secrecy? Did I do something wrong? I didn't feel like they were just escorting me somewhere. It felt like they were taking me somewhere quiet, maybe even to get rid of me. But I hadn't crossed them in any way. All I did was ask for a job as a hitman to take care of their dirty work. I didn't think that was a reason for killing me. So we finally reached the underground garage where a large car was parked. It looked like a small limousine, though I can't recall the brand. I do remember it had 2 long seats facing each other. Don Pescara was sitting on one of the seats. The 2 crocodiles who had walked me down directed me to sit opposite to the boss. Then they took their places beside me, one on each side. Don Pescara remained silent as the driver began to move the car. I couldn't bring myself to look directly at Don Pescara. Sitting here, flanked by his two intimidating associates, and after all, I was only 18. 20 minutes later, the car came to a stop. I looked outside and saw we were in front of a restaurant. There was an Italian flag flying, but the place wasn't big and looked pretty old. I thought to myself, is this where mafia bosses hang out? Doesn't seem like it. We all got out of the car, just as we were about to enter the restaurant. Don Pescara gestured to one of his associates, indicating that I should stay outside. That crocodile turned to me and said, "Stay here, outside the restaurant and wait." It was freezing that day, and I stood outside in the cold, watching them enter the restaurant. It was quite small, with only 4 tables. At one table, an elderly man in a wheelchair was using an oxygen tank. A young, beautiful girl was by his side, taking off his oxygen mask to feed him, then gently wiping his mouth before putting the mask back on. The old man looked like he could be like 100 or 200 years old, needing that level of care. Don Pescara and the 2 crocodiles with him approached the old man, taking turns to kiss his hand. They spoke with him briefly, less than a minute. Then I saw the old man glance towards the window, trying to see what I looked like. I quickly looked away. Then I started thinking to myself, who am I? I've met a mafia boss, and now we're here to meet an even bigger boss, someone everyone respects so much. And I'm just 18 years old. They wouldn't bother to kill me. I'm not that important to them. What's going on? Then one of the crocodiles told me to come inside. As I entered, the old man took off his mask and stood up from his wheelchair, moving like someone in their early 20s. He then walked to a door, opened it, and we all followed him through. That door led us to a laundry service. In the corner sat a large man at a table, who I later learned was the boss of this place. He was eating pasta, but more like a pig. His mouth was stuffed full, and he was holding a fork in one hand and a cigarette in the other. The crocodile guys told me to sit in a nearby table. Then the old man leaned in and whispered in my ear, "Why did you burn that bartender alive?" How did he know? Even the police were clueless, and there was nobody else around that night. Then he said, "Listen to me. This city is mine. It doesn't belong to the police, not to Chicago, not to the Americans. It is mine. I am the one who decides who lives and who dies here, who stays and who goes, and who gets to work. In 3 months, you would start working with Don Pescara." Then I asked him, why in 3 months? "Because that's when your hand would be fully healed," he said. I told him my hand was fine, but then one of the crocodiles grabbed my hand, slammed it onto the table, and the other one handed the hammer to Don Pescara. He struck my hand so hard, I felt the bones shatter. After that, my memory fades, except for being placed in a car and left at the hospital entrance. That night, I got my hand treated, then took a taxi back home. I spent the entire next week at home, watching television, wildlife documentaries as usual, and hardly eating anything. 1 week after the hammer incident, there was a knock on my door. It was a boy around 13 or 14 years old. He handed me a pack of cigarettes and an envelope. Inside the envelope, there was $500. And this same routine happened every single week. The young kid would knock on my door, bringing me cigarettes and an envelope with $500 in it. I then realized that I had become one of the mafia's dogs. It was exciting to finally be part of the mafia, but I also felt disappointed in myself. I had read books about how the organization operated, built on respect and hierarchy, but the reality seemed far from what those books described. 2 months later, the kid knocks on my door again. He gave me the cigarettes, but this time, along with the $500, there was also a plane ticket in the envelope. I looked at the ticket, and it was for Pittsburgh, together with an address on a piece of paper. It looks like the mafia has business in Pittsburgh now.